The clock on the wall struck 7 in the evening. In the penthouse apartment on the 28th floor overlooking the Chicago skyline, Nathaniel Hayes, CEO of Hayes Tech Corporation, was fastening the last button on his sleek black dress shirt, the expensive tuxedo fitting snugly around the tall, powerful frame of a man accustomed to million-dollar handshakes and endless silent nights. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his collar one final time, then quietly let his gaze drift toward a small photo frame placed on the vanity, where his late wife once smiled while holding their newborn daughter. Her eyes were still as gentle as ever, though now only living in memory. Nathaniel swallowed hard emotions threatening to spill, but compressed into a weary, heavy sigh. A knock at the door startled him. "Mr. Hayes, the driver, is waiting. The Tokyo investors have just arrived, and they're expecting to meet your girlfriend at tonight's fundraising gala." Nathaniel only nodded. He muttered under his breath, "She'll be here. Just someone I hired through an app. No real name, no background story. All he knew was that she called herself Ella, rated 5 stars, professional, discreet, refined. That was all he needed. A beautiful face to stand beside him for one crowded evening. A shadow to legitimize a businessman too busy to love, and too broken to open his heart again. Across the city in a tiny rented attic room, Ella was also standing in front of a mirror. She smoothed the sleeve of a navy blue gown that flowed down to her ankles. The off-shoulder cut highlighted her graceful figure while remaining modest. Her dark blonde hair was softly curled, resting on her shoulders. Her face carried a tasteful touch of makeup, sharp enough to leave an impression, gentle enough not to seem showy. Ella had worked as a rented girlfriend for years. She had accompanied lawyers, politicians, even celebrities. She knew how to keep the perfect distance smile at the right moments and speak only as much as needed. But tonight, for some reason, her heart was beating faster than usual. "It's just another role," she whispered to herself in the mirror. "Step into character, smile, walk out." When Ella entered the Fairmont Chicago, where the Hayes Foundation charity gala was underway, light from the crystal chandeliers cascaded onto the marble floor like streams of liquid gold. The jazz band played a soothing love song. Champagne glasses clinked, gowns swept by polite laughter, and firm handshakes floated like passing breezes. Nathaniel was standing among a circle of high-ranking investors, his face, calm eyes quietly observant. When he saw her, ella, she walked in like a completely different current of air, not dazzling, not ostentatious, yet her gaze, deep proud tinged with sadness, a kind of elegance none of the wealthy women around him could ever carry. Nathaniel Hayes, she spoke first. He paused, surprised by her initiative. "Ella, that's me," she smiled, slipping her hand naturally into his arm, as if they had known each other forever. That touch wasn't cold, not trembling, but gentle like autumn water. Nathaniel was about to say something when, "Daddy," a small voice rang out from afar. A little girl about 3 years old ran toward them, her pink fluffy dress bouncing like a cloud, her soft brown curls swaying with each step. But strangely, she didn't run to her father. She stopped right in front of Ella. The child tilted her head, studying Ella as though searching for something. Instinctively, Ella knelt down, her eyes softening. "Hello, sweetheart. Your dress is beautiful." The little girl stared at her for a few more seconds, then suddenly broke into a radiant smile, reaching up to touch Ella's face. "Can she stay forever?" The question rang clear across the ballroom full of serious adults. Laughter rippled through the crowd of investors. Not mocking laughter, but a surprised, tender kind, as though for that brief moment their hearts had been awakened by a child. Nathaniel froze in disbelief. His daughter usually kept her guard with strangers. Yet here was Ava, the little girl who had closed herself off ever since her mother's passing, clinging to a woman she had just met. Ella gently lifted Ava into her arms without even asking for permission. Every movement was natural, almost uncanny. "Maybe she thinks I look familiar somehow," Ella said softly. Nathaniel didn't respond. He had no idea what to feel. But one thing was certain from this moment on, nothing would go according to plan. A night had fallen. Chicago's traffic thinned out, the high-rise lights fading into a veil of light mist. Inside the black SUV, Nathaniel sat up front in silence, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror. In the back seat, Ella sat quietly holding Ava, The little girl had dozed off on her lap, her breathing steady, her tiny hands clutching the hem of Ella's gown as if afraid of being left behind. The navy gown was slightly wrinkled now, Ella's hair spilling loose across her cheek, yet her face glowed with a tenderness rarely seen. The tenderness of a woman not performing a role but truly present for a child who needed her. When the SUV stopped in front of his building, Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, then turned slightly. "If you're not in a hurry, would you like to come up for a while?" Ella looked at him, her eyes tilted as though silently asking, "Is this courtesy or something more?" His voice softened. "I have some good tea, and I think Ava wouldn't be happy if she woke up and didn't see her mommy." Ella didn't answer right away. She glanced down at the sleeping child nestled in her arms, then gave a small nod. Nathaniel's apartment was luxurious, yet strangely silent. The minimalist decor, every detail arranged so meticulously it felt cold, more like a showroom than a home. Ella stepped inside with Ava, her eyes instinctively scanning the space. No scribbled drawings, no stuffed animals, only books awards and a few photographs from Ava's infancy. Nathaniel set his wallet on the table, shrugging off his jacket. He glanced at her. "My home is a little short on laughter." Ella turned, smiling softly. "Not exactly. I think laughter is dozing off on my shoulder right now." Ava nuzzled into Ella's neck as if she had known her forever. Nathaniel froze. In the kitchen, warm amber light spilled from above. Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of water, but stopped when he saw Ava stirring awake, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, the little girl mumbled, eyes still half closed. Ella laughed lightly. "Mommy huh?" She named me Ella, shrugged, glancing at Nathaniel as if expecting him to reject it. But he said nothing. Ava fully woke, running off to fetch her unicorn pajamas. Before Nathaniel could react, Ella was already tying the child's hair back, as gentle as a real mother. "Okay, time for family play," Ava declared brightly. "Mommy, sits here, Daddy sits there, and I'm the baby." The little girl pointed assigning roles like a tiny director. Nathaniel and Ella laughed, but followed along anyway. "Now Daddy goes to work. You have to say goodbye," Ava instructed. Nathaniel leaned down, kissing his daughter on the forehead. Then Ava pointed to Ella. "And Mommy too. Daddy has to kiss Mommy too." The room went silent. Ella stiffened slightly. Nathaniel froze as well. "It's just pretend," Ava emphasized, her voice more serious than ever. Nathaniel lifted his gaze, meeting Ella's eyes. She didn't look away. She wasn't expectant, just waiting to see how far he would go in this game. He bent down and placed a light kiss on her cheek. A faint flush spread across Ella's face, but she said nothing. No one said anything. Ava giggled, continuing her play with stuffed animals and plastic teacups. The 2 adults sat quietly, each harboring their own storm inside, not from a role, but from something stirring far deeper. When Ava finally fell asleep, Ella wandered into the kitchen. "Do you usually act this well?" Nathaniel asked from beside the counter. Ella rinsed her hands, not looking at him. "I don't know, but with Ava, I don't think I was acting at all." Nathaniel turned to face her. She stood there in the dim kitchen light, her hair let loose the gown, traded for the soft sweater he had given her. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever known. No heavy makeup, no practiced smile. She sat down, exhaling softly. "Children always know what's real," she murmured. A long silence settled. Nathaniel nodded, glancing toward Ava's room. "I can't remember the last time she called anyone Mom." Ella's gaze softened. For the first time, there was no wall of performance, no polite veneer, just a lonely man and a woman with her own scars sitting together in a quiet kitchen. And the beginning of something, unnamed. That night, Chicago seemed to hold its breath. Outside the living room window, the first spring rain tapped gently against the glass, each drop a faint, steady rhythm. Nathaniel and Ella still sat side by side at the kitchen counter, each holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Neither spoke, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was a rare one, soft, truthful, where 2 people didn't need words to know they were touching something fragile. Nathaniel stole a glance at her, then suddenly spoke in a low voice. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ella didn't look at him, only nodded slightly, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the darkened window. "What did you dream of when you were a child?" The question was so simple it was almost painful. Ella froze for a moment, then slowly set her teacup down. "I used to dream of standing under the stage lights," she whispered. in white point shoes, a tutu skirt billowing, Tchaikovsky swelling through the hall, and the whole world holding its breath as I spun a perfect pirouette. Nathaniel stayed silent. Only the rain continued its rhythm outside. I started ballet when I was 3. Ella went on, her voice quiet as morning mist. My mother believed I was born to dance. And honestly, I believed it too. She gave a small, wistful laugh. Not to hide her pain, but to finally release a burden she had carried too long. At 17, I was accepted as an alternate at the Paris Opera Garnier. I was ready for my first lead role. But during a rehearsal right before my debut, I slipped. Nathaniel turned fully toward her, listening intently. One wrong leap, one fall, one sharp crack. I thought it was just a sprain, but it was a fractured vertebra. They had to brace it. I could never rise onto point again. The doctor said I was lucky I could still walk normally. Ella paused, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Her eyes carried no tears, only the emptiness of someone who had already accepted her fate. I was no longer a dancer. No more lights, no more performances, just a nameless girl in a city that didn't know me doing whatever it took to survive. Nathaniel didn't reply. He quietly rose, fetched a wool blanket from the chair, and draped it gently over her shoulders. "Thank you," Ella murmured. "I know that feeling," Nathaniel said, his voice roughened. "The feeling of losing what once was your every breath, your entire life, and then waking each morning, forcing yourself to live without it." A silence fell between them, not heavy, but filled with unspoken empathy. Ella bowed her head, his words having brushed against the deepest place inside her. Her lashes trembled. Then slowly she stood, not hurried, not panicked, just as though she needed space to breathe. She stepped toward the counter where a small photo frame leaned against a fruit basket. Ella bent down to look more closely. In the picture was a young woman, long hair, tired eyes, but a gentle smile, holding a newborn baby. A man's arm, Nathaniel's, encircled her back. Ella carefully picked it up. Her voice dropped low. "She's beautiful." Nathaniel walked over, pausing beside her. "Her name was Lily, wasn't it?" Ella asked softly, eyes still fixed on the photo. Nathaniel gave a slight nod, unsurprised she had noticed. And the way she spoke the name, like a reverent whisper. I guessed. Ella continued, turning the frame slightly. "There are faint words in the corner. Lily and Ava, our forever moment." He nodded again, a faint sorrowful smile tugging at his lips. "You're the first person in 3 years to read that." They stood quietly for a moment. Then Nathaniel spoke, his voice almost too low for himself to hear. "She passed when Ava was 3 months old, leukemia, just 7 weeks. Ella set the frame back gently. She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't need to. The slight nod and the compassion in her eyes said far more than any empty phrase. Since then, I don't let myself remember Lily's voice too clearly. Nathaniel admitted, his voice breaking. If I remember, it's too hard to keep living. Silence. Then Ella whispered, as though sharing a secret. Some things don't disappear. They just move from your memory into your chest. Nathaniel turned toward her, his eyes softening. Not in a rush, not an outpouring of emotion. Just a quiet acknowledgement. She understands. Ella stepped away, moving toward the balcony where the city lights shimmered in the distance. The rain had stopped, the air freshened. Nathaniel grabbed his coat and followed her out. They stood side by side in silence, like two old friends sharing a windless autumn night. I still teach little girls in the neighborhood, sometimes, Ella said, gazing outward. Nothing professional, just a few basics. But kids, they don't need perfection. They just need someone to believe they can dance. Nathaniel nodded slightly. Ava's never said she wanted to learn, but I notice she listens to music a lot, spinning around the room. Maybe. He trailed off, exhaling. Ella smiled faintly. I saw it today when she ran to hug me. The way she steps, how she balances, it's natural. But underneath that, she wants someone to guide her. Nathaniel looked at her in surprise. You saw all that in just a few minutes. Ella's smile softened. When I lost my ability to dance, I thought my heart shut down too. But later, it was the children, their clumsy first steps, that softened me again. The wind brushed by. Nathaniel's hands tightened on the balcony railing. He turned to her, not as an employer, but as a father, as a man who had lost and was seeing something that might save him. I don't know if Ava's ready, but if you're willing, I'd like her to try, under your guidance. Ella was quiet. Then she nodded gently like the movements she once lived for. I won't force her. I'll just be there silently holding out my hand. If one day Ava wants to step forward, I'll be the one to keep her from falling. Nathaniel stood still, struck. He couldn't quite name the feeling stirring inside. Not love, not desire, but a softening of his soul, as though in a world too heavy there was finally someone, willing to stay just to keep his daughter steady. It wasn't she is a part of me. It was simply, I am no longer alone. A pale ray of sunlight slipped through the curtains as Ella opened her eyes. She was lying on the long sofa in the living room, a thin blanket draped across her body still warm. The first sound she heard was the faint clinking from the kitchen. Nathaniel was making coffee. A little surprised she was still here, Ella sat up and smoothed her tousled hair. No one had asked her to stay the night, and she hadn't asked either. Ava had fallen asleep after their little family play. After she and Nathaniel tucked the child into bed, Ella had been ready to leave. But as she looked around the quiet apartment, then back at Ava, sleeping peacefully, something inside held her back. Not the contract, not courtesy. Just, she didn't want to go. And strangely, Nathaniel hadn't asked her to. When Ella stepped into the kitchen, he was pouring coffee into mugs. Good morning, he greeted first, his deep voice soft as mist. Morning, she replied gently. I made some for you too. Unless you don't like coffee in the morning. Actually, I'd die without it, she teased with a smile. Nathaniel handed her a cup. That moment, so simple, made warmth rise in Ella's chest, as if she wasn't a stranger anymore, not someone hired. 3 days had passed since the gala. Strangely, Ella was still in that apartment. She hadn't exactly moved in. At first, she only intended to drop by for a few hours each day, then return to her tiny rented attic. But Ava clung to her, refusing to let go. And Nathaniel hadn't objected. In fact, he was the one who suggested sending a driver to fetch Ella's clothes and essentials. Just stay here for convenience, he had said briefly though. His eyes held a gentleness that was rare. So, in the following days, Ella brought a small suitcase, leaving it in a corner of the living room. During the day while Nathaniel worked, she opened her laptop and taught a few online beginner ballet classes for kids. It was her part-time job for extra income. Simple lessons where she helped children warm up, listen to music, and discover joy in moving. For Ella, it wasn't just work. It was a thread tying her back to the dream ballet had once promised. At night, once Ava was asleep, Ella sometimes went back to her small apartment. But more often, she stayed, because here there was laughter, because here there was a sense of family she had never known. She knew the boundaries. She wasn't Lily's replacement, nor Nathaniel's real girlfriend. But every shared meal, every small ballet practice in the living room, every look of trust from Ava drew her closer. The apartment began to feel less like a penthouse and more like home. On the third afternoon, rain suddenly poured over Chicago. Heavy, sweeping rain, thunder rolling, the sky dark and gray. Ella and Ava couldn't go outside, so they stayed in the living room. Ella grabbed a blanket, wrapping herself and Ava inside it like an owl's nest. Ava hugged a stuffed bear while Ella played a soft classical piece from her playlist. She thought the child would protest, grown-up music, but Ava simply closed her eyes and began swaying to the melody. Ella froze, watching. You like this music? She asked softly. Ava nodded, her hair falling into her eyes. It feels warm, like Mommy. Ella went silent. I was told Mommy used to play classical music for me to sleep, Ava whispered. Ella didn't ask more. She just switched the track to a gentle waltz. Ava twirled instinctively. No technique, just a child's joy. But there was something tender in each movement. Ella rose, stepping closer. Do you want to learn a few steps? Ava's eyes lit up instantly. You really know how to dance. Ella smiled, nodding. Once upon a time I thought I would dance forever. Ava considered, then lifted her hand like a princess in a fairy tale. Then, be my ballet fairy and teach me. And just like that, the first lesson began. Not in a studio, no mirrors, no professional music, just a warm apartment, rain outside, a little girl and a woman who once dreamed, now teaching herself how to believe again. Nathaniel came home later than usual that evening. He hung his coat, set his laptop on the table, and was about to head into the kitchen when laughter drifted from the back patio. He stepped closer and stopped short at the sight. Ava spun in circles, arms, raised hair, flying. Ella sat on the rug, had tilted up eyes glowing softly, counting rhythm with a smile. It was a scene so different from the quiet nights he was used to. Nathaniel didn't speak. He simply sat at the threshold, his hand resting on a picture frame, an old photo of Lily holding Ava. Lily's face still serene, her eyes full of love. He stared at it for a long time. Then gently he turned it face down. Not to forget, but to allow himself to feel what was happening now. Later that night, with Ava asleep, still smelling faintly of rain, clutching the new ballet shoes Ella had ordered online, Nathaniel poured 2 glasses of wine. They sat together on the sofa, not close, but no longer strangers. I didn't know she loved dancing this much, Nathaniel said, his voice tinged with guilt. Ella looked down at her glass. Sometimes, it's already inside the child. All they need is someone patient enough to draw it out. Nathaniel was quiet, then lifted his gaze. And that someone turned out to be you. Ella shook her head. I'm not sure I'm the one. I just happened to be there when she was ready to step out of her shell. Nathaniel studied her for a long moment. Then, will you keep being here? Ella froze, not out of shock, but because it struck the very fear she carried. She was afraid of moving forward, afraid of her past, afraid that this bond, born out of pretense, had become too real. Her eyes lowered. I don't want her to think I'll stay, only to vanish one day. I went through that as a child. I don't want to leave that kind of scar on another little girl. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Then we won't make promises. No commitments, no roles. Just, if you choose to stay, Ava will be happy, and I will be too. Ella met his eyes deeply. A part of her wanted to nod right away, but another part, the part that had been broken, still held back. And that restraint told Nathaniel something. This wasn't fleeting. It was something that had to be nurtured with patience, with sincerity. He didn't need an answer right now. He only needed her not to walk away yet. Ella set her glass down, whispering, I'll teach Ava, at least until she's confident enough to dance on her own. Nathaniel nodded. For me, that's enough. And that night, as they shared their silence, neither spoke again. But something inside both of them had shifted. Not loudly, not clearly, but like an old melody being played again this time, with gentler hands. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows, bathing the apartment in golden warmth. Chicago looked freshly washed after the storm, draped in a rare clarity. Nathaniel sat at the dining table, laptop open, but untouched. Instead, he listened to the sounds filling the apartment. Little bursts of laughter, the patter of small feet, and a gentle voice drifting from the living room. Ella was teaching Ava how to tie the ribbons of her new ballet shoes. The little girl sat cross-legged on the rug, eyes wide with excitement, firing off endless questions. Is it tight enough like this? What if I jump high? Will it come loose? Ella, can I fly in these? Ella chuckled carefully, adjusting the tiny ribbons, her voice patient and warm. You don't need to fly. As long as you can stand firm, the whole world will spin around you. Nathaniel sat at a distance, but every word sank straight into him. He had never seen Ava bond with someone so quickly. His daughter had always been guarded, withdrawn into her own little world after Lily passed away. Yet, in just a few days, Ella had brought her to life, filling the apartment with chatter and joy. Quietly, Nathaniel closed the laptop. Work could wait. But this moment could not. In the days that followed, life in the apartment transformed. Ava began to look forward to her ballet lessons every afternoon. Her pristine white shoes were placed neatly by her bed, treasured like a secret jewel. The once still apartment now overflowed with classical music, laughter, and the occasional thud followed by an "ooh" as the little girl stumbled through new steps. Nathaniel often came home late. Yet, whenever he opened the door, he found the same sight: Ava spinning in circles. Ella nearby, watching with radiant patience, arms always ready to catch her if she lost balance. He needed no words. That single image was enough to remind him he wasn't alone anymore. On Friday night, after Ava had gone to sleep, Nathaniel stepped out onto the back patio. Ella was already there, wrapped in a light cardigan, gazing out at the glittering horizon. "You're still awake?" he asked gently. "I don't sleep easily," Ella admitted with a soft smile. "Music usually helps, but sometimes silence like this is enough." Nathaniel lowered himself into the seat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't want to disturb the fragile rhythm they had built. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Thank you for staying." Ella turned, caught off guard by his candor. I'm not sure I should be here this long," she confessed. "This wasn't the role I signed up for. I just couldn't bring myself to leave Ava right away." Nathaniel met her eyes, recognizing the worry hidden there. "I understand. I don't expect you to promise anything, but if you walked away now, you'd leave a hole in her world." He stopped, his voice softening further. "And in mine too." Ella froze. Her heart jolted at the honesty of it, yet trembled with fear. She had been the one left behind before. She had walked away before. She knew how deep those wounds cut. Lowering her eyes, she whispered, "I don't want to hurt anyone, especially a child." Nathaniel didn't touch her, but his voice carried warmth and steadiness. "Then don't leave yet. Stay until you feel ready. Not for duty, not for a contract, just because we both need each other right now." Ella lifted her gaze, locking onto his. No pressure, no chains. Just a man who had lost too much, now trying, carefully, to open his heart again. She gave a small nod. That night they sat together wordless. Yet within the silence something was named at last. Not love at first sight, but the fragile beginning of trust. The following day, Nathaniel took Ava to a nearby park. Ella went with them. For the first time, the three appeared together outside the apartment. Passers-by glanced, some recognizing Nathaniel Hayes, the cold, untouchable CEO who usually only appeared in financial magazines. But today he wasn't a CEO. He was simply a father walking beside his daughter and the woman who had begun to change his life. Ava ran across the grass with a small ball, her giggles ringing out. Nathaniel sat on a bench watching fondly, while Ella crouched with open arms waiting for Ava to come running back. The scene was so peaceful that Nathaniel felt a fleeting wish if only time could stop here. That night, after Ava had fallen asleep from an entire day of play, Nathaniel and Ella sat once more in the kitchen. A small golden lamp cast a private glow between them. Nathaniel hesitated, then spoke. "I want to ask you something." Ella tilted her head. "What is it? Would you stay longer? Not just for a few days, but for a real stretch of time?" Ella stilled. He rushed to explain. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but my work is hectic, unpredictable. Ava needs stability, and you've brought that to her." He paused, his voice dropping softer. "And to me as well." Ella lowered her gaze, twirling a spoon between her fingers. Her heart raced. She had never imagined herself becoming part of someone else's life in this way. "If I stayed, what would I be? A nanny? A pretend girlfriend?" Nathaniel shook his head, his voice firm yet gentle. "You'd be whatever you're comfortable being. No labels, no contracts, just yourself." Ella drew in a long breath, gathering courage. Then she nodded slowly, whispering, "All right, I'll stay until both Ava and I are ready to take the next step." Nathaniel exhaled deeply, a faint smile flickering at the corners of his lips. In that quiet kitchen, two souls who had once feared love now faced each other without walls for the first time. Later that night, Ella stepped out alone onto the balcony, gazing up at a sky filled with stars. Fear still lingered inside her, the fear that it could all vanish like a dream. But entwined with it was something she had never dared hope for before. Maybe this time she wasn't just playing a role. Maybe this time she was truly living. That day the Chicago sky was heavy and gray. A light drizzle had been falling since morning, tapping against the wide glass windows, turning every sound in the apartment into a soft whisper. The atmosphere was weighted yet strangely warm. Ella sat cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by craft paper and child-safe scissors. Ava was completely absorbed in cutting out pieces of silver foil, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on making a crown. Every few moments she would look up proudly and exclaim, "Mommy E, look, this is my princess dancer crown." Ella laughed, though her eyes flickered with hesitation before softening. Since that day, Ava had called her Mommy E, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At first, Ella had found it awkward, almost too heavy, like playing a role too big for her. But day by day, every time she heard it, her heart melted a little more. Behind those two words, she could feel the innocent trust Ava had placed in her. From his office, Nathaniel stepped out, his shirt, still neatly pressed, but his eyes showing fatigue from endless meetings. He stopped in his tracks at the sight before him, his daughter wearing a paper crown while Ella sat nearby, her golden hair tumbling over her cheek as she held up scraps of silver foil for Ava to glue. It was an ordinary, even simple scene, but to Nathaniel, it was priceless, worth far more than any multi-million-dollar contract. He smiled faintly, but the smile didn't last. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Nathaniel glanced at the screen. A message. His face immediately fell. It was from an old acquaintance in the business world. "Just so you know, Ella isn't new at this. She's been on those girlfriend-for-hire forums. Many times. Photos ads the works. You're not her first client. Be careful." Attached was a screenshot. Ella in a red dress smiling brightly, though her eyes looked distant. Beneath it read, "Event companion. Discreet professional." Nathaniel stood frozen, his grip tightening on the phone. From the living room, Ava squealed with delight. Daddy, look at the crown Mommy E made for me." He lifted his gaze. Ella looked up too, smiling softly, unaware of what he had just seen. Nathaniel's chest grew unbearably heavy. Night fell. Ava was fast asleep, clutching the silver paper crown in her small hand. The apartment glowed faintly with the light from the kitchen. Ella came downstairs, her hair loose after a shower, wrapped in a thin cardigan. She looked serene, more at ease than ever before, as if she truly belonged here. But Nathaniel was restless. He stood in the kitchen leaning on the counter, his phone lying face down beside him. Its dark screen seemed to weigh on him like a stone. When Ella walked in, he didn't greet her with his usual quiet smile. "Nathaniel, are you all right?" Her voice was gentle, tinged with worry. He lifted his head, his eyes hard. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Ella froze. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel turned the phone around the photo, glowing under the kitchen light. Ella's face went pale. In an instant, every wall she had carefully taken down over the past days was rebuilt. Cold, distant, unyielding. She swallowed hard, her voice quiet but steady. "Yes, that used to be me." Nathaniel's hand clenched. "How many times?" Ella closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, then looked straight into his. "Why do you want a number? So you can measure how good I was at pretending before I ended up here in this house." Her voice wasn't sharp nor pleading, just weary, bare, unadorned. "I did that job to survive, to pay rent, to eat. But with Ava, with you, nothing these past days has been pretend." Nathaniel stood still. He wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt had already been planted, and it took root too quickly. He turned away, his voice sinking. "I just don't know what to believe anymore." The words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were the very thing Ella feared most, that even when she lived honestly, people would still see her as nothing more than an act. She stayed quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed sorrow. "If that's the case, maybe I should go." Nathaniel spun back, but too late. Ella was already moving swiftly into the living room, gathering the small suitcase she had left in the corner. Every movement was firm, decisive, as though pausing even for a breath would break her. Before she left, she stopped, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it carefully on the counter beside the vase of flowers. "I'm not good at saying things, so I wrote this a while ago, in case the day came when I had to leave. You'll understand." Her voice cracked. The door opened, the storm wind rushing in, then shut behind her. Nathaniel stood motionless in the kitchen, listening to the rain lash against the glass. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt hollow again. After midnight, Nathaniel walked to the table where the letter still lay. He unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate, trembling. "Nathaniel, I've played roles for so long that sometimes I forget who I am. I've smiled when I wanted to cry, held strangers' hands when I felt empty. I've hidden so well that I believed I only existed on someone else's stage. But with you, with Ava, I wasn't acting, I was alive. Please believe that, even just a little." "Ella?" The words blurred through Nathaniel's tears. He laid the letter down, his fist tightening. He didn't know if he was angry at her or at himself for letting fear choke something that had only just begun to bloom. In Ava's room, the little girl turned in her sleep, her hand still clutching the fragile paper crown. The vast apartment sank back into silence, and Nathaniel realized the loneliness he thought had finally lifted had returned heavier than ever. A week had passed since that stormy night. Nathaniel no longer counted days by meetings or reports. He counted them by absence, The mornings without the sound of his daughter's laughter, mingling with a gentle woman's voice in the kitchen. The evenings without tender eyes watching Ava's every step. The apartment had reverted to its former state, immaculate orderly. And cold. Ava was different. Every morning when she woke every night before bed, she asked the same question. "Where's Mommy E?" At first, Nathaniel dodged the truth, telling her Ella was busy. But on the third night, Ava clutched her teddy bear, bursting into tears. "She's gone, isn't she?" "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" The words pierced him like a knife. He scooped her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "No, Ava, you didn't do anything wrong. It was Daddy. Daddy wasn't brave enough to keep her here." Ava didn't understand completely, but she clung tighter around his neck, as if afraid he too might disappear. Meanwhile, in another corner of Chicago, Ella stood in her modest little studio. The peeling wooden floor, the faded walls. Yet the room rang with children's laughter. A group of kids, mostly from working-class families, were practicing the basics of ballet with her. Ella raised her arms to demonstrate her hair tied back neatly, her voice firm, yet kind. "Straighten your backs. That's it. Wonderful ballet isn't always about perfect jumps. What matters is that you feel joy when you move." The children giggled, spinning awkwardly, some tumbling but bouncing back up right away. Ella watched them, her chest aching. Ava's face flashed in her mind. The way the little girl laughed after a clumsy fall, declaring, "I'm a dancing princess." The memory made Ella's eyes sting. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself, and kept teaching. She had to stay strong, at least for these children. One Saturday afternoon, Nathaniel drove through a worn-down neighborhood on the city's edge. In the passenger seat, Ava hugged her ballet shoes tightly. She had begged all week. "I want to see Mommy E. I want to show her how I dance." Nathaniel had hesitated. He feared Ava's disappointment. He feared facing Ella's eyes. But when he looked at his daughter, he knew avoiding this would only carve a deeper crack into her small heart. The car stopped in front of an old red brick building. A small sign over the door read, "Community Ballet for Children." Nathaniel carried Ava inside. Music drifted from the studio piano notes, soft and familiar. He pushed the door open, and his heart stalled. Ella was there, standing at the front, her voice gentle. "One more time, everyone. Imagine your little bird spreading your wings." The children spun, clumsy yet radiant. Then Ella turned, and her eyes met Nathaniel's. Both froze. The air seemed to still. Curious children looked back and forth, but only Ava squealed. "Mommy, E." She darted forward, throwing herself into Ella's arms. The little white shoes tumbled to the floor with a thud. Ella knelt, embracing the child tightly, her eyes brimming with tears. Her voice cracked. "Ava, I missed you so much." Nathaniel stood motionless, watching. In Ella's eyes he saw fear, sorrow, and a tenderness that had never wavered. After class, the children gradually filed out their cheerful goodbyes, echoing. Only the three of them remained. Nathaniel stepped forward, holding a small box. He opened it to reveal Ava's old white ballet shoes, the very pair Ella had used to teach her those first steps. "I kept them," he said quietly, "because they're not just shoes. They're proof that those days were real." He inhaled deeply, his voice trembling low. "Ella, I was wrong to doubt you. I let fear drive you away. But this past week, I've realized the emptiness you left can't be filled by anything else." He lifted his gaze. The eyes that once had been steely and distant now quivered as though they might shatter. His voice broke each word, weighted with raw truth. "I lost Lily. I thought my heart had rusted shut forever. But when you came, you didn't replace her. You opened a new space, for Ava, for me, and for yourself." The small studio went utterly still. Only Nathaniel's pounding heartbeat and the faint piano rhythm filled the air, as if waiting for her answer. Ella trembled, torn by emotion. Tears streamed down her face, her hands clutching her dress as though to steady herself. "Do you know how much it hurt?" She burst out, her voice fractured. "That night in the rain. When I saw doubt in your eyes, it was like every piece of my past came back to mock me. Like I was nothing more than a cheap performance." Nathaniel's chest constricted. He stepped closer, but Ella raised a hand, stopping him. "I wrote that letter days before it happened," she admitted, voice shaking, "because I knew. One day my past would surface and you'd stop believing in me. I prepared for it because I've always been left behind. and when that moment came, I ran. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I was terrified. Terrified of that look. The same look others had given me, telling me I was just a fraud. Her words cut the air like blades. Raw, trembling, but unwavering. Nathaniel couldn't speak. His throat tightened. His eyes flooded with remorse. Slowly he extended the tiny ballet shoes toward her. His hand shook as though offering not just shoes, but his very heart. I was wrong, Ella. I let fear and grief smother everything. But when you left, I realized all that remained was emptiness. You're not a role, not a memory. You're here. You're the chance for me to live again. He drew in a shuddering breath, his voice breaking yet fervent. Please, don't walk away this time. Will you dance with us? Not just today, not just for a while, but forever. The room pulsed with tense silence. Ava stood between them, eyes wide and shimmering like stars, trembling as though her whole world depended on Ella's answer. Ella stared at the shoes in his hand. Ava's laughter echoed in her memory. The way she fell and rose again, calling her Mommy E without hesitation. Those images clashed with her own painful past. Rejection slammed doors, years of pretending just to survive. Her body urged her to retreat, but her heart pulled her forward. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook violently. Slowly she reached out her fingers, hovering, trembling, as if afraid the moment would vanish like a dream. She looked up straight into Nathaniel's eyes. Her voice cracked, but each word rang clear, fierce, like a vow. I won't forgive easily. Wounds need time, but I can't deny it. You and Ava have become part of me. If I have to fall again, I'd rather collapse on the dance floor than run away in the rain. So, she smiled through her tears, nodding firmly, deliberately. Yes, I'll stay, and I'll dance with you both. In that instant, Ava squealed with joy, rushing to wrap her little arms around them. Nathaniel bent down, pulling both his daughter and Ella into his embrace. 3 hearts once shattered now beat together, not perfectly, but truly. 1 month later, the small studio was decorated with simple paper lanterns and flowers. Yet within that space, a wedding unfolded, humble, tender, and full of warmth. Ella wore a pure white dress, her hand trembling as it clasped Nathaniel's. Ava stood in the middle, scattering handmade paper petals she had carefully cut herself. The guests weren't high society, but ordinary, heartfelt people, parents of the children, an elderly couple Nathaniel once helped through charity, and a few old friends. When the minister asked, "Do you vow to stand by her side in joy, as well as in sorrow for the rest of your life?" Nathaniel tightened his grip on Ella's hand, his voice steady. "I do." And when it was Ella's turn, her voice shook, breaking into sobs of happiness. "I do." Ava clapped her hands and cheered. "Yay now, I really have a Mommy E." Laughter rippled through the room. In that moment, no one doubted it. This was a family, not born of blood, but of healed wounds of trust, rediscovered of a love that came slowly, yet ran deep. A full year had passed since that day when Nathaniel placed the ballet shoes into Ella's hands in the little studio. A year long enough for past doubts to fade, for scars to begin healing, and for love. Something both had thought was forever lost, to take its true form. Carter Ballet House, named by Nathaniel, after Lily's surname, in honor of his late wife, was no longer just a modest classroom. It had grown into the largest community center in the area, a place where children from all walks of life came not only to dance, but to find a home. Mounted on the wall beside the entrance hung a large photograph, Nathaniel, Ava, and Ella, the 3 of them standing barefoot on an empty stage, hands joined bowing together. Beneath the photo, a plaque read, "A place where every child can dance. A place where every soul can heal." That morning, the center buzzed with unusual excitement. It was the year-end recital, the day Ella's students would perform for their families and friends. It wasn't about winning awards or perfection. It was about stepping forward, smiling, while spinning, standing back up after every stumble. The wide studio was packed with an audience, parents in simple clothes, a few of Nathaniel's old friends, even families who had once been supported by the Lily Carter Memorial Fund. All eyes were focused on the stage, brimming with anticipation and pride. Backstage, Ella was fixing Ava's hair. The little girl wore a flared white dress, her ballet shoes already scuffed from practice. Her eyes shone with excitement, though her lips quivered slightly. "Mommy, I feel nervous," she whispered. Ella knelt down, resting her hands gently on Ava's shoulders. Her voice was soft as a breeze. "It's okay to be nervous, Ava. It means your heart is in every step. Just remember one thing: you're not dancing alone. Daddy and I will always be right there watching from below." Ava threw her arms around her, then inhaled deeply, steadying herself. When the music began, the entire room fell silent. Ava stepped into the spotlight, small yet graceful. She raised her arms, spun her movements not flawless, but radiant with joy. At one point she wobbled, nearly falling. The audience gasped, but Ava laughed, steadied herself, and kept spinning, her laughter ringing out like silver bells. The crowd erupted in applause. From the wings, Ella's eyes glistened. In the front row, Nathaniel sat rigid, his hands clenched, pride swelling so fiercely it nearly broke him. In every turn of his daughter, he glimpsed Lily. But he also saw Ella, her patience, her quiet strength, the love that had carried them through this year. When the music ended, Ava bowed. Then, without warning, she dashed off stage, tugged Ella's hand, and dragged her into the spotlight. "This is my Mommy E. She taught me how to dance." The hall burst into thunderous applause. Nathaniel rose, stepping up to join them, his hands clasping theirs. Ava stood between them, lifting both her tiny arms high. Together, the three of them bowed. The ovation roared like ocean waves, rising and rising, refusing to fade. After the recital, when the crowd had left and the studio was empty, Nathaniel wrapped his arms around Ella from behind. His voice murmured at her ear, "Thank you for not leaving again." Ella turned, her smile shimmering through tears. "Thank you for giving me a place to come home to." They gazed into each other's eyes. Words were no longer needed. Ava bounded toward them, slipping between, hugging both tightly. And in that moment, they knew this was no longer the story of a lonely CEO, a broken ballerina, or a motherless child. This was the story of a family, built not by blood, but by trust, love, and fragile steps that somehow always found their rhythm. Some families are born of blood bound by unbreakable ties, but others are pieced together from souls that once seemed shattered. People who met at the right time in the right moment of fate and chose to take each other's hands. Nathaniel once believed his life would be nothing but work and responsibility. Ella once thought her dream had died with the fall that ended her dancing. And Ava, innocent and small, had grown used to living without a mother's presence. Three souls, like broken fragments drifting apart, found one another in what seemed like a meaningless gala. From cautious glances to sunlit afternoons of teaching dance. From doubt that tore them apart to tears that restored trust. They had walked a long road, a road proving that true love doesn't need perfection, only patience and sincerity. The day Ava twirled on stage, her steps imperfect, but her smile radiant. It wasn't just her victory, it was the triumph of a family. From now on, every spin she made carried not only Lily's memory, but also Ella's guidance and Nathaniel's steady embrace. Their story didn't end with a final period, but with a new beginning. One written with love, forgiveness, and the belief that every heart deserves a second chance. And perhaps that is the message for all of us. Sometimes the strongest families aren't born. They are danced into being, shaped in ordinary moments and the choice to stay instead of walk away.